We got a couple of other calls. What how do you feel about souls, Adam? Do you want to talk about some souls?
Yeah, it's
We
actually a very interesting topic. So yeah,
Let's
let's.
do it. Let's chat with Sven in Washington's. Any pronouns, Sven? How are you?
Good afternoon. How's it going?
Good, good. You were
Good.
chatting up with Adam and Secular Rarity. What you want to talk about souls, it sounds like. What about souls, man?
Yeah, secular. I've talked to you before a couple times.
Yeah.
People may know me, but I'm pretty agnostic myself about things. But I am more driven towards a soul belief. And I was listening to a cognitive scientist talk about how artificial intelligence may be giving us more insight or evidence for souls with pattern recognition, because to humans it comes so easy to recognize certain things that we can't just tell uh, a computer, because everything has like an infinite amount of things in common, and it's really things that they don't have in common that make us recognize it. And so in a world of waves and constant motion, how are humans able to pick up on certain patterns? Like, what makes us recognize those patterns versus all the other patterns happening at the exact same time?
That's interesting.
That makes sense.
Kind of. I may
guess
be thinking about it a little.
idea that like souls are.
Yeah, so I guess when it comes to like pattern recognition, it seems pretty mundane to me that we would have to be able to anything that's alive would have to have some type of pattern recognition, right? Because otherwise, like like a fish would just randomly start eating things in the ocean, and then that probably wouldn't keep it alive, right? Because it needs to eat like certain things, because otherwise, like probably can't digest it, or maybe doesn't have teeth or something, right? So like pattern recognition in and of itself doesn't seem to me to be anything super like special or anything. But maybe I'm just not understanding how pattern recognition could lead us towards understanding souls. Sven, are you still there?
Adam, did you have anything you wanted to add on as well?
Oh, please, yeah.
Well, you can see lots of pattern recognition in snowflakes. Does that mean they have souls? I mean, they always form in particular shapes, very accurate and geometrically beautiful. It doesn't. I guess the preceding question is, what is a soul, and is a soul really related to patterns? It's
Yeah.
hard to say that something exists or doesn't exist if we cannot even define what it is.
Yeah, very good, very good
And
point.
its relationship to patterns.
Right. With snowflakes, I would say that I don't know if they recognize patterns. I would more put that, or in line with Platonism, it would be that, all things are trying to become a perfect form of something. So everything is in a shape. And so snowflakes are trying to make a pattern. I don't know if snowflakes recognize patterns in the way that a human recognizes patterns. And that would be the distinction. Like, just because something forms a pattern doesn't mean that it's recognizing that pattern. Like,
Okay.
philosophy is the ability for humans to think about thinking. And so it's like what makes us able to process and label these patterns, while at the same time there's an infinite amount of patterns happening around.
Let's go to your understanding of what a soul is, because I think Adam had a really good point when he said we need at least some kind of basic structure for the three of us to kind of talk about this more. So when you think of a soul, what exactly? I mean, give me some properties of it that we can kind of suss out and play with.
Some properties. It's what's the word? Like an ethereal. It exists in the aether. It's our, in Platonism, soul is something that you're born with because it's you were a soul before, and then you fell asleep to come here, and you're waking up and discovering all of these things that you knew before. It comes with innate knowledge. So the soul is, and that's why cognitive science, this is a cognitive scientist that I was listening to, because it is a lot of psychology or neuroscience involved. This is a case of psychology versus souls, but it kind of goes back to a couple claims I've heard today with like the knowledge, where does truth and knowledge come from, you know?
Okay.
Like souls are the things that give us the ability to have knowledge.
Okay. So far the two main things that I've heard, Sven, are it's something ethereal, which I think ultimately we still probably need a definition for ethereal, because I'm not sure what like ether is or anything. But the other thing is, the other kind of property of it, sort of more or less, is it's the source of our knowledge. It's the ability for us to have knowledge. Is that right?
Correct.
If so, what could we do to demonstrate that the source of our knowledge is actually a soul? Like, for instance, just real quick, I mean, and again, I know you and I have chatted before, so I know you're familiar with a handful of different neuroscientists and cognitive studies and stuff, but like generally, more or less, we kind of hook some wires up on people's heads, and then we can kind of watch patterns in their brain, and then we kind of group them together, and we say things like, this seems to happen every time we show them the color blue, and then we ask somebody to like think about blue, and then like the same pattern happens, like stuff like that. um what kind of demonstration could we do to show that the soul is the source of the knowledge, instead of, say, that squishy substance in our skulls?
I'm afraid, SR, and I feel like we've met this block before.
Yeah.
Are you asking me for an empirical test? Because this is, the philosophy of mind is armchair science. It's not a laboratory science.
Yeah, and I think that kind of is.
Accept that you exist and I exist in a reality. That's armchair science. You can't improve this thing. This is a armchair philosophy that you accept the axiom that we're in a reality.
Right, and I think this is
a laboratory experiment.
No, that's okay, Sven, because I think this is a reason that I kind of wanted to go down this route, because this is something that we were talking about earlier with our caller, who wanted to talk about how the bread actually transforms into the body of Jesus, but then we don't have any way to verify it because it can't be tested with our senses. My issue with that is that seems to be a very poor way of determining what actually is or is not happening around us. And the objection that we have to take some things without that super hardcore level of proof that we do with all the other things in the world, I don't find that to be an objection, especially if that is being objected to by somebody who also agrees with all of those things that I do, but then just adds one on top of it. If I have 4 things only that I can't actually prove, but with those 4 things, I can show a bunch of other demonstrations of stuff. If somebody else comes along and says, hey, I have those 4 things plus this other one, well, then I win, right? That's the whole point, because I have less unknowns like that. And if what you're saying is at the end of the day, the soul is just one of those like basic, metaphysical type things that we just have to accept to move on, it seems like you and I can agree on a bunch of other stuff with just my things that we can't prove that you also agree with. So I guess what I'm saying is, if there is no way to verify through empiricism, if there is no method for demonstrating that this claim is actually in reality, then shouldn't we always like not really accept that one? Isn't that kind of something that we should move on from?
I think the kind of difference is that you have those 4 things, and then you say is in actual reality. These 4 things are in actual reality. And what
logic is in
I would
actual
say.
reality. I think logic is a concept that applies to reality. It's a description of what's going on. But like we can't prove that logic is real because we have to use logic to disprove logic. But I think from all our conversations, like you'd accept that. And you don't think like logic exists in some way that like, my house does or this microphone or something.
Well, no, Platonism holds that there's a universe or a dimension of realms that exist. I wouldn't say that logic exists like your house and these do, because those exist in
Sure.
space and time, and like forms where souls will eventually go exist in an aether, a different dimension. So yeah, we would agree on everything. Like I said, the problem is you have those four things and you're satisfied with saying,
Right.
this is what works to show what exists and works in our reality. But the fifth thing that philosophy of mind would bring to the table is the materialist could just feel comfortable saying in this reality. But metaphysics is going to say, well, we need to talk about what that means to be in this reality and what reality even means. And so it's just a concept that I think materialists don't even want to offer any substance to just take it as an axiom and a priori. Whereas
Adam,
a lot of people who are religious even are more moved by these metaphysical claims of what it means to be profound. And I think the materialist is lacking in not wanting to have that fifth thing to the table.
Yeah, Adam, you look like you had some thoughts.
I agree to some extent with Sven about reality. I was actually going with this, but instead of reality, I was going to say, okay, two thoughts. Let me separate my thoughts into two things. One, the question itself, are we talking about could a soul exist or does a soul exist? Because if we're going to talk logic and philosophy, we're talking in the realm of could. Is it possible? But the moment we say, does it exist? If we want that kind of yes or no answer, then we have to use some sort of verification to know if something exists or not. And then the problem that goes after that is the word exist itself. When we say that it's ethereal, even the ether is how we use it in a way, or maybe because I came from an IT background, it's still physical. We can measure things ethereal. We can measure microwaves or waves that we cannot see. So when we say, does the soul exist? Are we talking about some sort of a physical existence, even if we cannot see it? It doesn't have to be like the mic or the camera that I'm using, but even if it is unseen, is it ethereal, physical ethereal that we can measure? Or are we talking about something that is completely non-physical? Because the moment we say, well, it's completely non-physical and it's unmeasurable, then what does it even mean exist?
Yep.
Like we're unable to fathom that something exists, because when we use the term exist, it's either something that you can touch and feel, or you can something that you can measure, or waves, or but when you say it exists but it's not even of a physical nature, then what does it even mean exist?
Yeah. Very good
So these
question.
are the words that I'm battling with in my mind before I can even step into the question. What
Yeah.
is a soul?
Yeah. And I think that's great because that kind of goes. Oh, please go ahead, Sven.
Yes, Adam, I do really love that pushback, and that's why I'm not a theist, but I also will not call myself an atheist just because of the stigma with it. And that's why I focus on souls and not God beliefs, because I think just because something's unfathomable, I think it's kind of an incredulity argument. But with souls and existence, we can talk about what it means to be the human soul. I agree. And I'm talking about the God, a deity, a God's what it could mean. I think that's unfathomable because we are not living that existence, but what we are living and what we are experiencing, the qualia around us, that is something very personal. And so I don't think it's completely unfathomable to talk about what it could mean to be a soul that could go on to live in a metaphysical universe. Does that make sense? Like, I really do agree with you about claims of gods and all. Like, they're unfathomable because that's another reality existing outside of time and space. But
it is not the soul that is not
here.
unfathomable. It's the concept of something exists without any physicality to it,
Right.
seen or unseen. That's the part that I said it's unfathomable by the human mind. But the soul itself is, because we live, we can talk about it.
Would you say, Sven, that in your understanding of when you are using the term soul, would that be something that is non-physical, kind of like Adam was talking about, or is it physical in some way?
No, I would take a dualist. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I would take a dualist stance, and I think that's what Platonism is as well. It's a metaphysical and a non-physical entity that we are living with in this physical reality.
Yeah, and I think that is pretty much, a really good point where Adam and I both are like, hey, this is something we got to figure out first, because I really don't. I have no conception of what that could possibly mean. And that's not to say that because I can't conceive of it, it can't exist. I'm just literally saying, just the same with like the whole logic thing. It's like you can't even dispute logic without using logic. So if we accept that there are these non-physical things around us, well, then how the heck could we ever possibly understand that? Because it seems everything's physical. And if I try to push back on non-physical things, well, I have to use physical means to do it. So it seems to kind of put us in that same place. So, where would you kind of push back on that? Where would that be? Because it seems like it's the non-physical aspect that is kind of tripping both of us up.
Yeah, I think I would push back on that where you said it seems pretty physical. I think to me, to spiritualists around the world, to theists around the world, it doesn't just seem pretty physical. Our personal experience is what seems very, very, very profound and different than just the physical. And so for you to just say it seems physical it doesn't, like you said, you have to prove logic to prove logic. You have to use the physical to show physical. And so that's where the disconnect is, I think, between...
But how would you use the non-physical to demonstrate physical? Or how would you use the non-physical to demonstrate non-physical?
You would use logic to prove logic.
But logic is physical because it's things that are firing in my brain, right? And it's a description of the things in the world around me, and I have to actually say stuff. So my vocal cords like vibrate, and then they move the particles in the air. And then like this microphone does magic with it with computers and stuff. I don't understand that, but I mean, like it would still be a physical method that I'm using to. So how would I use a non-physical method to demonstrate the non-physical or the physical?
I guess I'm not understanding that question. I think maybe the disconnect would be where mathematicians that are Platonists say that, there is math in the world. Like, even without us observing it, there would be water, there would be two hydrogens and one oxygen. There wouldn't be a mind to say, hey, this is two hydrogens and one oxygen. But in the world, without the mind, there still would be a form of mathematics going on.
Sure. But that's all physical stuff, isn't it?
Physical.
And math at the end of the day is just a description of the physical stuff, which the description itself is then still physical, because even if it's just the thought in our head, it's just a bunch of neurotransmitters and stuff.
If I may add one word, even the word exist, when we say something, soul or not, when we say something exists, that term is physical, is measurable. So now when we say that something is non-physical, exists, that sentence in itself needs a lot of clarification.
It seems contradictory to me, is exactly where, I would just say that it seems problematic because of what the characteristics of non-physical things seem to be. right? And if one of the characteristics is that we can't perceive it with any physical methods, well, then the first question would be, well, like what non-physical methods could we use? And if we can't come up with any non-physical methods, then we really don't have any good reason to accept these non-physical things. But Sven, we've been chatting with you a lot, man. We got a couple of other calls, and we do really appreciate it. I do enjoy talking about souls, man. So always thank you so much. And I always have good calls with you, I think, Sven. We always get into some interesting chats for sure. But yeah, I'm with you, Adam. I think implicitly when I say exist, there is some physical aspect coming to it.
Yeah.
And I have absolutely no conception of what non-physical could be. And that's a big problem. I mean, because then we're just accepting things that don't, we're just accepting all kinds of claims for with no evidence, no reason really. It's like, I don't think Bigfoot exists, but I also think Bigfoot would be a physical thing if it existed. But
Exactly.
I don't know. Maybe Bigfoot has a soul, but